It's like you never even left, Paul.
I would like to describe how happy I am to be here doing this today, but I feel like there are no words.
I'll, um, I will say that this Monday, I believe, is notably better than last Monday.
All right, that is absolutely fair and true. Yep. At this point, I was probably halfway across the country in a plane.
Yeah.
Jammed into the corner of a third seat on a little coach row, like a sausage being extruded into a package. It was great.
Graphic. I was going to say on a 737 or an A320, more than likely.
Yeah, probably a 737, I think. But yeah.
Yep, I was on an A320. But anyways, folks, today's show is brought to you by Cloudberry. Protect your data by backing up your home or business to your own cloud storage like Microsoft, Amazon, or Google Cloud or others. Check them out today at cloudberrylab.com/FRD. And Paul, I think we've discussed this many times.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Miracast is not working. We've discussed that many times.
You need that new Chinese device I showed you today.
I know. Actually, I was like thinking, man, that might actually work better.
Chromecast knockoff that also does Miracast and AirPlay, which, to be honest, that kind of thing would be interesting.
It really would be.
Yeah, if it really came from someone reputable.
Yeah.
I guess, any company, a Belkin, something like that, Anchor, I don't know.
Yeah, I need someone to be able to call and scream at when it's only partially working.
Yeah, right.
But Paul, have you ever tweeted something and then people completely misdrew it and it just never goes away?
I think that's all that I've tweeted. Isn't that what Twitter is for? You can say the most innocuous thing and just have it be taken horribly by everybody. Isn't that the point of Twitter?
Yeah. Twitter's tagline is, Twitter's tagline is actually everyone has an opinion, which is fine. I have an opinion, you have an opinion, it's fine. But
yes.
Like my general rule is that if you tweet something and then there's like a conversation thread, you should read that thread because then you will fully understand the opinion, not just the one tweet in isolation because you only get 280 characters. Paul, I don't think we talked about it here. We talked about it in Vegas. We've talked about it somewhere that long term, Google is a very big threat to Microsoft. Apple, not so much. Would you tend to agree with that?
Yeah, in the sense that it's funny. I've been mentioning this for a while. I've been writing an Apple editorial for a long time, and there's a paradox to Apple, and the paradox is they're the world's biggest company, but they're kind of out in their own little bubble over here. They don't really necessarily, impact almost anybody when you think about it. I mean, they're huge, but it is kind of a goofy thing. Anyway, yes, to your point, Apple absolutely is big in markets that Microsoft really doesn't compete in.
Correct. And so that is the very basic premise of the whole opinion or whatever. And I very simply tweeted out, I said, in terms of being a Microsoft fan, since you cannot run Windows Phone anymore, I said, if you were a true Microsoft fan, you would run iOS simply because they don't compete with Microsoft. Google, if you buy a Google phone, you're giving money to Google, who competes with them long term. And that was it. It was nothing that iOS was better than Android, that Android is a subpar OS. People took this very personally.
I think you could make a case for both of those. But yes, okay.
But people took it very personally that I was saying iOS was better than Android. That has nothing to do with it. It was simply that if you give money to Google, you are helping fund them, and they are the long term. They're more than likely going to upset Microsoft than Apple would, because Apple has no enterprise, they have no real cloud, they have no productivity. Google absolutely does. If you buy an iPhone, you're supporting Apple, who is not going to hurt Microsoft long term. Google long term very well could disrupt Microsoft. That was it. And people went.
Google already has disrupted Microsoft. Yeah. Google is the owner of the world's most popular personal computing platform. Google has one of the world's most popular cloud platforms. I mean, they are arguably the new Microsoft, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I that was it. That was and like the emails and the very angry tweet saying, look, but you can run Microsoft Launcher on Android. That makes it a more Microsoft. The point was not that it was a more Microsoft phone. The point was where the money goes to supporting a company that is going to harm Microsoft. And granted, I'm a very big opponent of free market. If Google knocks off Microsoft, fine, so be it. I don't think that's going to happen, especially in the enterprise space, like the cloud stuff. But from a consumer perspective,
Okay.
absolutely. So
That's an interesting perspective. We also heard kind of off the record, if you will, from some folks at Microsoft at CES that iOS makes more sense for Microsoft guys than Android as
sure.
well, right? And it doesn't so much have to do with Apple competing or not competing with Microsoft as it does with the fact that Microsoft is doing what the rest of the industry is doing, which is essentially releasing stuff on iOS first and then porting it to Android, right?
Yep.
And to your earlier point, you kind of dismissed this, although I think this is an important point as well. It's not about iOS being better than Android. I mean, obviously, iOS and Android both have things that make them better than the other, right? They have different strengths and weaknesses and so forth. But one of the primary strengths of iOS is that fact, that experiences tend to be developed first on iOS. They tend to be better on iOS. If you compare the same apps across both platforms, in most cases, they're actually better on iOS. And part of it has to do with the consistency of the platform, the fact that there are many fewer numbers of different device types, of different resolutions and screen formats and so forth. It just makes it easier to make a better app on iOS. And for whatever it's worth, when it comes to tablets, there is iOS and there is nothing else. And I think on a number of levels, you could make the argument that iOS, for whatever limitations it has, is arguably better than Android, which of course explains why I'm using Android, because I hate myself.
We appreciate your sacrifices.
Well, I mean, a lot of Microsoft guys who are still pining away for Windows Mobile for some stupid reason will point to like the tiles and the user experience and stuff. And it's like, guys, people run mobile platforms so they can run apps. This is a learning. I mean, you have to understand that that's a fact. It's not, the UX doesn't matter so much. And so, we can complain like the iOS home screen is ridiculous. The icons all flow in a row. You can't arrange them wherever you want. And that's a fair complaint. I wish they would fix that. Doesn't prevent me from running apps, It's just a minor roadblock on the way to the reason I'm there in the first place, which is to run those apps. So I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry. We've gotten off track here. So you're telling me, just so I understand this, I did see this tweet, by the way. And I'm sure I made some kind of a jerk off comment because it's Twitter and that's what you do.
I'd be willing to bet you did.
Yeah, I think it's a safe bet. I respond in a negative fashion because it's fun. But so, I mean, did anyone agree with you? I mean, what?
Yeah.
I mean, it's Twitter, so probably not. I don't know.
Well, I think it was I think it was everybody who had bought an iPhone to that point agreed, and everyone who had bought an Android phone up to that point disagreed. Probably about how it shook out.
I mean, look, we all have a rich background in partisan personal technology wars, Microsoft guys versus Apple guys versus Google guys, whatever. But I think we need to get to the point now where we got to get kind of past that. I think we're in a post-platform era in a way. Like, you can make whatever argument you make for running iOS to the iPhone, and I can make this argument over here for whatever I choose. But the thing is, I'm using Android right now for various reasons. You've seen my frustration with it. I mean, I've been very open about how terrible it can be. I mean, there's an inelegance to these devices that I find to be incredibly frustrating. And you have to kind of wonder, coming at this from the PC world of the past, why I would put myself through this kind of unreliable, whatever, system again. Like, why would I keep doing this to myself? But, there are arguments to be made for Android too. I mean, and I think you just have to kind of accept that. I mean, ultimately, it's funny because you made a post of less than 100 words or characters or whatever that is. And, what's the impetus for this statement? I mean, I think ultimately you're trying to help people maybe think about things in a way that they didn't think about in the past, consider things a little differently. And I think the proper response to your post is to be like, yeah, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, that's cool. And then, get on with life, right? And that's not what happened.
I think my my new Twitter slogan for my personal self is going to be, "Have I offended you today?" Like, I mean, that's basically what it boiled down to.
Let me complete the statement because it's like a line from Desperado, which is an excellent movie. where he says, "Have I thanked you yet?" And she says, "No," and he says, "I will." And in your case, it's have I offended you yet? I will. It will happen. Just keep reading. And also welcome to Twitter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking of diseases, what is this? I didn't even look at this, but what is this Andromeda strain? I interpreted that as like an
Well,
Andromeda disease,
actually,
but probably
it's
not.
it's very related to what we were just talking about in a sense. Microsoft probably will release this Andromeda device this year.
Hmm.
I have some firsthand knowledge about it that's a few months out of date now, but we've seen patent applications, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they've been talking up their desire to invent new form factors for some reason and, whatever. And so my whole thing was like, I see this kind of a roller coaster that Windows and Microsoft fans go through. And I'm worried about these people. I mean, it's kind of amazing to me how many times we can get hit in the face and then keep coming back for more.
Hmm.
And I don't mean, well, I do. So it's just like what you said. I don't mean to suggest that Andromeda is going to fail. Actually, I want to be really clear about this. Andromeda is going to fail, but that's not the point, assuming they release it. It's
Right.
just that if you are an enthusiast for this stuff, if you're a Microsoft guy, which is kind of goofy to me in a way to be like a cheerleader type, I guess what I'm asking for is just some rational, logical thought on this topic. I just want you to put it in the perspective of what's happened in the recent past, the various products that they've kind of thrown out there that have gone absolutely nowhere, or even the products they've kind of gone out there that you think might be innovative and interesting, like Surface Studio or HoloLens or whatever, and sort of understand that these things are actually not successful and that I wouldn't get all excited about Microsoft's, triumphant return to mobile just yet. I feel like we're already moving on, to the next thing, which I think is ambient computing, by the way. But the mobile ship has kind of sailed. And if you're saying that this thing's just going to be another PC, I would say, well, Windows 10s and the Microsoft Store and whatever else kind of point to the fact that there's not a lot of innovation going on there, and that this doesn't have a sustainable ecosystem. So, great, but I'm a strong believer in the right tool for the job, and the right tool for a lot of productivity stuff is a PC. But the right tool for most people day to day out in the world is something that already exists. It's called a phone, and I don't feel that this solves any problems that anyone has. We don't have a big markets of people that need pens on computers. We don't need more note-taking things. We don't need another way to read stuff. I point to the iPad, for example. When they introduced that, Steve Jobs said, look, we have this thing and we have this thing. Is there a thing in the middle? And for it to exist, it has to do all this other stuff better than those other two devices. That device isn't coming from Microsoft in 2018, folks. It just isn't. I mean, it just isn't. I mean, and it's not a dig at Microsoft. It's nothing they can do about it. The ecosystem just isn't there. So I'm just trying to reset expectations here, because I see the same pattern of abuse occurring over and over again, where people get all excited, like, oh my God, look, there's a patent. They're going to do it. It's going to be awesome. I don't know.
I know that this has been around, and Andromeda's cool, and whatever it becomes and morphs into will be great. But I agree. I mean, I've even heard from folks internally saying the sales expectation for a device like this is relatively low. It's not going to be a mass market product, but they feel like they need to do something in the Snapdragon area because, well, that's kind of what Surface is, and they'll put out a device much like the Surface Studio. The Surface Studio is not a high volume device. It's kind of a hero market type product. And although I would expect the Snapdragon to be even less volume than that.
Yeah. I mean, so you make a good point. The thing is, for Microsoft, unfortunately, the sad reality is that no one has copied any of their other devices, right? The Surface Pro is the one that's been copied all the time. Yes. The 2-in-1 has been kind of established as a type of PC. It's successful within that world. They didn't invent it, by the way, but they, whatever. They kind of formalized the design. Everyone has one now. They all look like the Surface Pro. Okay, kudos to Microsoft. And I also think it's fair to say that there's an interesting thing in history repeating itself. When the Media Center PC arrived, the first Media Center PCs were just towers. And Microsoft was like, guys, you get them. It has to look like stereo equipment. It has to go in the living room. And we eventually saw things that were kind of like that, but that never, never really took off. When Windows 8 came out, Microsoft said, look, we want to do multi-touch. We want to do convertible form factors, pen. Let's do all this stuff. The first Windows 8 PCs, we saw them at the launch, were just PCs. The PC makers of that day were not willing to take the chance on these new kind of form factors. So it's fair to say that Microsoft feels that the move to ARM requires some rethinking of what a PC can be. And the PCs we've seen before are very much traditional laptop computers, right? You could make that argument. We're doing it again. I just don't know that we're in a point in time where the PC evolves anymore, really.
Yeah.
Right? Adding better battery life is better, but it's the same thing. It's still a battery-powered portable computer. I mean, adding cellular connectivity is great, but a lot of us do that through our phones already, and it's like, well, it's not super innovative new, We'll see. I'm not dismissing it. But I do think we need to have realistic expectations. I think that's my point. Certainly, there's a lot of questions here.
Yep. I got to tell you, the one thing that I think Microsoft could still do very well in, and I know it's not the most fun thing to talk about, I think HoloLens still is that area, because if you look at what was going to be their biggest competitor, which is Magic Leap, which is kind of just fizzling around, nobody really knows what they're doing. Microsoft is actually in the market with a product. Granted, it hasn't really evolved much, but at the same time, nobody else is kind of jumping at it, and we know that they're working on a next generation product, and so hopefully they can get that right. But to me, that is more HoloLens V Next. To me, is more exciting than the Andromeda stuff, personally.
Yeah, I think it's already over for HoloLens. This type of technology is mobile, and that's where Microsoft just can't offer anything, and that's unfortunate. I don't know. We're going to see more applications of AR on phones and tablets than we'll ever see on HoloLens. It's just and I don't mean
sure. No. I do agree with
although
that.
I do mean that. I mean use cases for it. I always talk about that excellent app. You can go to a museum and be looking at a dinosaur skeleton, and you hold up your phone in front of it. You see what the dinosaur looked like. I mean, it's that combination of the virtual and the real worlds that are really exciting, and you can't do that with HoloLens. You could, but you'd have to spend all that money and be back at home, or in an office. Right. I mean, it's just not the same thing. So,
well, time will tell.
Not their fault.
Time will tell whenever we see. Moving on here to a couple headlines that I'm going to read here, because this came out in the news today. It says Barcelona to ditch Microsoft in favor of open source software. Paul and I were chuckling offline because, hey, didn't Munich do that? And actually, yeah. And it says Linux pioneer Munich poised to ditch open source and return to Windows. So I wish Barcelona the best. They are quickly, Paul and I were joking, what we need to do is just go to Europe and hop from major city to major city pitching open source, run a whole bunch of consulting fees up, and then just move on to the next town, because that's what it sounds like. Because on paper, it sounds great. Look, you don't have to pay Microsoft for Office anymore. You don't have to pay for Microsoft for Windows anymore. But you know what you do have to pay for, Paul? All those custom solutions and all that training.
Part of my Apple paradox story is that the paradox there is that open always wins, and yet Apple is the only computer that you can say competed in every single wave of personal computing history. They were there in the PC wave, the internet wave, mobile wave, they'll be there in the ambient computing wave, and yet they're defeated each time by open systems. And open, I don't mean open source, to be clear, although that certainly is the case with some of this stuff. Open just means that you open your platform up to others, and Apple fights that, and often denies it. I mean, Steve Jobs didn't even want apps to be available on the iPhone, which is kind of crazy in retrospect. I sort of appreciate where Barcelona is coming from in the same way that I sort of appreciated 15 years ago where Munich was coming from. But I mean, I think they're misunderstanding open versus open source. And they're severely misunderstanding the capabilities of these systems. I mean, oh boy, I don't know. I don't know. Where do you draw the line? Like if for some reason it's okay for city employees to use personal computers or tablets or phones that are built by proprietary hardware companies or whatever, but for some reason the city's software systems have to be open source. I mean, it doesn't even, where does it end? Where's the Linux phone? Don't say Android, because Android's actually not open. Not really. Well, it's open.
There was
a
Ubuntu phone at one point, or at least they tried, I think, on Kickstarter to raise a whole bunch of money, and they didn't.
Yeah. Not only did they fail, by the way, but that company walked away from the strategy that Microsoft still has with Windows, which was to make this one system that ran across multiple device types and form factors, and supported touch and whatever else. And, and they literally in the past 6 months or whatever it was, have given up on that because it's the right tool for the job thing, right? This unification thing is baloney.
Yep. And we kind of sort of know, well, we'll be curious to see what Apple announces this year. Supposedly they're going to be closer to merging that, but they've certainly had no problem in quite literally raking in the cash without a complete unified solution. So
they are literally the biggest company on earth, which is, again, the paradox. It's amazing.
Yep. Paul, just to give you an AccuWeather update, it is snowing at my house. We're supposed to get up to 3 to 4 inches. Since you care so much about the weather, I suggest you take a look because I suspect that it will be plummeting your house 24 hours.
I did. I asked my non-digital personal assistant, my wife, about this topic because as soon as we chatted about it, I walked out to get some coffee and I was like, hey, Brad says it's snowing where he lives, which means in one day we're going to get snow. Is that the case? And she said, yes, it's supposed to snow tomorrow into the next day. So if I understand Pennsylvania, like I think I do, my daughter's going to have 3 days off from school this week because today is a holiday. Yep.
My kid and wife are actually both upstairs because my kid goes to a school and my wife works at a university, and they are upstairs actually baking cookies as we speak.
Which is exactly what you should be doing today. Also, keep the oven open because it is freezing. Oh my God, is it cold? And what is happening?
Yeah. I'm about done with that. I'm ready for warmth. I'm ready for golf season to return. I would like to go and do that.
Yep.
But here we are. Freezing.
I don't know right now, but the last time I checked, which wasn't that long ago, less than 20 degrees. I'm done with it. So, what is the date? It's the 15th.
Yeah, we're about 6 weeks away from modestly warmer weather.
Yeah, I know.
You got anything else for today, Paul?
No, I'm going to try to publish this Apple thing. I was working on it when I was with you in CES. Like it's not, hasn't come together in the way that I want it to. But
I know exactly.
Originally, it was kind of a bit of a screed against Tim Cook, and I decided that was misguided. But
how very
that said,
unusually rational of you. So.
Well, I feel like I'm misunderstood. No, I will say this. I feel like Apple today is where Microsoft was with Steve Ballmer. It's like this guy who's not an engineer, not a visionary, not a co-founder, trying to continue the previous strategy, and it doesn't work because that guy isn't the original guy. Sorry. And that they needed to make a change. And it's not Tim Cook's fault. I'm sure he's a great guy and everything. And no one is Steve Jobs. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. But it's interesting, the things that have happened, good and bad, with this company. Tim Cook has opened up iOS a little bit. You can put your own keyboards in there and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting. Like, there's that part of it. But my God, like, they've made so many mistakes that Apple has literally apologized like half a dozen times in the past year alone. Like, Apple didn't apologize for anything under Steve Jobs. They built a phone that couldn't make phone calls, and they blamed the rest of the industry for it. And they spent the next 3 years re-releasing the same exact design, trying to get it right until you could finally make phone calls while you were holding it. I mean, that was Apple then, It's a different company. But, they're the biggest company in the world. It's like complaining about them is like standing in front of a tsunami. There's nothing you can do about it.
Well, I'm sure that will go over.
It's just as good as your tweet. Yes, I'm sure.
Yep,
it will be my most beloved post of 2018. I can
sit back here and just sip on a little drink, and just
Yep.
watch it all burn down. And
Watch the accolades come flying. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
Yep. Hey, Brad, you got anything else for today? Yes, I actually do, Paul. I do.
Yes.
I'm building
what would
a
that be,
computer.
Brad?
I'm building a computer, maybe even today, if all the parts show up. Yep.
I'm also building a computer, but mine's a little dinky Raspberry Pi computer, so it's probably not very comparable.
Yeah, I'm looking at all the parts strewn about. So basically what I'm telling you is I'm going to screw with the computer for the next 6 days and not get it to work and then send it all back. That is the most likely scenario outcome. But I figured we got to the point you sent me this very nice machine, which by the way is fantastic.
I know. It will work perfectly forever. There's no doubt about it.
I don't want to jinx it and say yes, but it is.
Yep.
It's nice. Like you were absolutely correct. You don't even know this thing is on. It is that quiet.
It's amazing.
And it will soon have a sister PC sitting next to it, which I'm sure will be much louder. But we'll get more into why this is all happening later. But
okay.
Yep. All right. I think that does it for today. If I can, Miracast, are you working today? Nope. Of course not. Where's my mouse? This is not actually Paris, by the way. This is where Paul and I ate dinner because we are lovebirds.
I wish I could say we had dinner at the foot of the Eiffel Tower, but we had dinner in Las Vegas, which actually was good. It was still good, but
it was nice, if you will. But folks, today's show is brought to you by Cloudberry. Protect your data, backing up to your home business, your own storage, Amazon S3. Google Cloud, do all that good stuff. Great for ransomware protection. Check them out at cloudberrylab.com/FRD. And we'll be right back here tomorrow with more banter, I guess. Have a good day.